Stefon Diggs. Remember when he came in, you traded for him. He had multiple years remaining on his deal, and you did a little bit of a restructure in order to create it so that it was a one-year deal in essence. It was a contract year, and unfortunately in that year, while he was playing well, he got injured. But what that means is that you had a void year in order to kind of manipulate the situation. And yes, we're getting into the weeds of the contracts and the salary cap, and I'm not trying to get too deep because I feel like I will also drown with you if we go too deep. But that void year constitutes, it has with it a 16.6, if I remember correctly. Actually, I should double check.
16-ish.
A 16-ish dead cap hit that you are going to have to just eat if that void year goes into effect. Now, if he resigns here, you can maybe do a little bit of restructures to that so that you can kind of find a way to do the cap accounting in such a way that it does not hit you for that exact number. However, if you get to 3 p.m. today, or 3 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. today, I had it right, you are going to have it to where that void year hits. $16.6 million is what you are having to account for on the salary cap without him even playing here. And if you decide to sign him back, if he ultimately signs back later, whatever his cap hit is on top of what you have there. And I think that the reason why I bring this into a conversation that we're supposed to be having about how you address the wide receivers is that's absolutely, I imagine any team does a little bit of their accounting based on, we have this much accounting or this much of the proverbial pie set for kind of positions in some ways. And that's going to eat up part of what you're talking about.
Chunk.
Or just in general, if you don't have to do kind of positional allotments or allocation, just as a team, you are looking at the projection is that you'll have, $3-4 million in salary cap space? That's salary cap space that you're going to need to find. You're going to need to find some space, whether it be for your rookie class to be signed or the numerous free agents that you have to have some this accounting there all the way across the team, but specifically with wide receiver, I have been of the opinion that you're going to need to bring in two because Tank Dell's not going to be available to you. You probably are going to draft one early on in day one or day two, and I think you probably want someone with a little bit of veteran feel to be brought in and signed as a free agent. And that makes it a little bit, it just inherently makes it less maneuverable to do this.
Well, okay, so just to sort of kind of muddle through all the details of this thing. So basically what we need to look at is if they can re-sign Stefon Diggs today, which is a little bit hard to fathom that they will.
Well, there's been no reporting on communication. Now, it's possible, and we know this about the Houston Texans organization, they move in silence like lasagna, right?
They do.
I think that there's I guess you have to say the whole thing, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Real G's move in silence like lasagna. Because otherwise it's like lasagna ain't silent. But the idea is like there's stuff out here in the public very often. Like there's not a lot of leaks that happen necessarily, and so it's possible that maybe there's some level of kind of conversation, but it does not seem like that. I would not have any particular indication of the case. Now, maybe something like this could happen to help you navigate this, because I think it's fair to assume that Stefon Diggs probably wants to play the market a little bit and see if he can find a space. I know that he was happy here. I know that he, seemed to grab on well to the culture in the locker room, whatever. However, what if something happens like Aaron Jones is doing, where the Vikings and Aaron Jones, and this came down, I believe this was Saturday, the Vikings and Aaron Jones agreed to move the void date of their contract to just before free agency.
Bingo.
That'd be something that would be huge. Yes. Give you an opportunity to get closer to free agency, and I know that technically it's tampering, but we know what happens in these leagues. Where
tampering?
Steph can get a little bit of an idea of, hey, what's out there, and at least if that void year, if you're going to ultimately carry it, you'll ultimately carry it. But if you get closer and you give yourself more of a runway for once and this team to figure out what they want and maybe come back around and make a deal that kind of helps you better address your salary cap, because this is not where you were last year where you had a whole bunch of money and you just spend it like you were in a supermarket suite. This is a little bit different. You have to be very cognizant, and 16.6 going on your dead cap is something you have to be very deliberate about in my mind.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is if somehow they were to sign him today, I think it'd be a little bit of a surprise, as we mentioned. But I also feel, obviously you would have an answer because the contract, they would be able to save more cap space by retooling his deal today. But you're kind of selling both sides short, including yourself. Like Stefon Diggs may have a better gauge, as you put it, like where he might land in free agency and what is out there. Hell, the Texans would have a better gauge as well in terms of like finding out more about some of the draft picks, finding out more of some of the free agents that they might be able to bring in as a wide receiver. Because you're right, they need more than one. And if you're if Stefon Diggs is a $16 million cap hit, that's a lot right there. But they need to draft one and they need to bring in another one too.
I think so. But we were talking earlier in the handoff with Seth and Sean. There's a lot of overlap here, man. And it also doesn't help. I heard those guys talking about it earlier today. We also have a lot of Knicks now and Ecos, and there's a lot of places where you can stumble if you're not careful. But we're talking with Seth and Sean, and Seth seems to be of the opinion that really you could get one and likely kind of draft one where you have your two guys that are really good. And he's right in saying that most teams only really had this year and having three guys that you felt were studs, and then you had your people behind them. But if you come through and you go, all right, you draft a wide receiver, maybe the first round, so you have a guy that you expect to step in immediately and impact. Who would you have as your front line? Nico and that wide receiver, whether it's Emeka Egbuka or, whoever else, Luther Burden III, whoever else that you would be looking at there, right? You'd have those two guys. And then you're hoping for, some development of John Mechie into a space like that, development of Xavier Hutchinson into a space for kind of that third wide receiver, maybe bringing in a very, very low money free agent to kind of come in and maybe find some space in there with you. Or maybe even you see a Nick Caley offense that requires more of 12 personnel where you have two tight ends on the field more often than not. But ultimately with all of that, the question I have is, then what happens if the car crash sport does the car crash sport thing and attrition hits?
Yeah. I think you need two top-tier wide receivers. I think everybody would agree on that. But is that going to be a veteran, or do you feel like you can find something that's already here? I don't think so. But you never know what Nick Caley believes of guys like Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson. But I think a free agent wide receiver, whether it's Stefon Diggs or anybody else, has got to be on the table. Well, T. Higgins is the gem, of course. Now, do you want to go that route or whatever? But there's others as well.
Right. Tyler Boyd is a name that comes up. I know. Shout out to Houston Stressens out there who kind of did a little bit of compiling of some of this. Right. If you go towards, do you want to get kind of a slot type free agent, because some of those guys that are out there, big money. There's some big money guys like Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin that might be gettable. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is a name that we've talked about. What is he going to look like? And then also with the Cooper Kupp, you're doing the double dip where you are trading some level of asset plus trying to pay him on what that happens. Is that something that you would like? Although you imagine there'd be some
familiarity. What do you think of Cooper Kupp?
And coming, how do you feel about the possibility of the potential of injury there or what have you? Tyler Boyd is a name, and if you're trying to kind of start coming back on money, him or Rondale Moore, guys like that, what are those going to look like there? Or do you even want to go in a different place where you get kind of more of an outside receiver, someone like Demarcus Robinson, who you've seen, or like a Diami Brown, who was not super impactful but showed up there, I believe, in Washington recently. It might be that level of kind of wide receiver that you're signing as a free agent that you don't necessarily know for certain is going to be the level of impact, but then you're just trusting on Nico Collins being the level of wide receiver that he is, and then whatever draft pick that you have, and then just having somebody that is going to be a professional at that third wide receiver. Do you feel like that's the way that I kind of look at this?
Yeah. Do you feel like Stefon would be the safer pick here to bring back a go ahead and pay? You're going to have a cap hit either way. Now it's a matter of it's going to be $16 million plus or less if you retool his deal. You almost feel like Stefon's the safer play, especially because you're going to have to draft a wide receiver anyway. Third round, whatever it may be.
I wouldn't go. I'm thinking first and second round are the other places
maybe
where
second.
I'm really looking. I mean,
I think first round they're going lineman, but that's just me.
I mean, offensive line, hell, it's gotten a lot of love from a lot of these mock drafts on places that they can go, and I wouldn't want them to be locked in on we have to take a wide receiver here to be fair. Plus, we've seen second, third round wide receivers come in and be very impactful. So I'm not trying to completely, but I could see very early that happening. Sorry, what was your question again? I didn't talk myself away.
Do you feel like Stefon Diggs would be the safer play? Because you have Nico, you have Stefon back from last year. Then you can kind of see where they fall with Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie, and draft a receiver, whether it's second or third round, whatever. Because you're going to you're going to have a cap hit anyway with Stefon Diggs, just no matter how much.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. I like the notion of Stefon. Yes.
Cardi B might be showing up at games.
Well, I mean, for me personally, considering it's not my money and also I go to games, I would personally benefit from such things if those things were transpire as you have laid out. Yeah. No, I like it. It would be the safer if we weren't talking about the injury. That's the big elephant in the room there. I mean, I can only surmise so much from like workout video, right? But it does seem like he's recovering pretty well, and maybe you could see him being ready and available for you early on in the season. I think that his game, I'm not as worried about that taking him entirely out of the capabilities that he has. So yeah, I kind of like that. If you can find a way to work the numbers in such a way where it's comfortable and you can make him happy with I think the projection of the APY is 13.5 million.
I'd take that.
Could
take that in a
could
heartbeat.
you work that in a place where you do that?
But
I don't know.
He take that?
Yes. Yeah.
And again, like he's coming off of an injury. I think really that before today's over, right before our show is over, even that maybe we find out that they went the route of the Vikings and Aaron Jones, where they moved that back. Give yourself an opportunity to have better ideas of what the injury, also the recovery from the injury looks like, and then giving Stefon Diggs an opportunity to maybe get a feel for what the market is out there and get more comfortable with possibly the idea of what the number looks like, right? Well, if the market out there is maybe not looking as hot, maybe he'd be willing to come back at a number that feels real palatable, and you can run it back with guys that are comfortable, a guy that is a leader type guy in Stefon Diggs, a guy he came in and immediately showed a level of leadership in this locker room. You have that, and then you can feel comfortable about we're going to add a nice young player to this who has an opportunity to grow, and then we go.
Would he sign a 1-year deal?
I think he would have to.
Given the injury,
approve it deal.
Yeah,
I think
so. That makes it more incentive, more attractive too.
I think so, but also one of the things that it would do, though, or it'd probably be like a deal with an option, like a 2-year deal, in order to make
sure.
Because 1 year doesn't give you much room to do the salary cap manipulation. I think that's part of the appeal here. I appreciate Ocho, though, texting in. 713 said, Texans need speedy receivers, not glorified possession receivers like Diggs. I know that you never liked Diggs, to be honest. But Rondale Moore, 4.3 and is cheap. He'd be okay with him? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go. I always, again, come back, there's more than one way to cook chicken, but I think ultimately I very much would like to see 2 wide receivers. Understand that that's a luxury in some ways, but I think it's a luxury that would be beneficial for this team to be able to know that you have give CJ a lot of tools to work with.
I feel like Stefon Diggs gets a bad rap for the season he had
this year.
Yeah,
I thought he was very good.
He was very, but stuff like that,
Well, Ocho was never particularly in on Stefon Diggs.
But he wasn't alone. I mean, I'm looking at the text board where that was a mistake.
Yeah, see, I would bring.
It wasn't a mistake.
Well, I mean,
he got hurt.
Compared to drafting a guy that you had control over, and part of the mistake, the notion of a mistake is that you're having to contend with that void year that you worked out with him. Now you're contending with $16 million of dead cap. That's part of that decision.
But you had to get a veteran in here. I mean, let's not rewrite history here. They were going for it last season, and they had to bring a guy in.
And honestly, I think it made sense because you had Nico Collins, you had Tank Dell, who had a monster year last year until he got hurt. And so I think you did need somebody like. I don't think necessarily you had to draft another first round or a first round receiver.
Exactly.
I think they wanted that veteran in there.
Yeah, and I think you maybe you go with one. Maybe you're in the Seth Payne lane where you go just draft a wide receiver and just kind of go with what you've got and hope that some of these guys that you have, you can continue to develop them. But it seems like someone on the text line, 346, I'm done with Hutchinson and Mechie thing. They're not good. I don't know that I would go as flatly, but I can understand why you'd be in a place where you go, I'm not waiting on that development.
No, I'm there.
Yeah.
To me, I wouldn't look at them and say, you know what, we good at receiver. Let's not get anybody else. No, I think they need to be pushed.
Especially with the idea of hey, the ways in which injuries are going to happen, and you saw that.
Yeah, and they had their chance last season, and unfortunately, they didn't really come up big.
Yeah.
Darius Slayton from the Giants, DeMarcus Robinson from the Rams. Robinson would be a familiar to. I like what we're doing there, but I just generally it feels like today we're going to learn a lot about the way that they go about this, and it might just be kind of status quo. They were planning on having to eat that $16 million and change of dead cap, and they move. And if that's the case, that's just less money that this team would have necessarily to work free agents wise. And of course, every team is going to have to do some work on doing, balancing some things out, making some things shake. In fact, I think the Athletic put out a list of various different, potential salary cap casualties. And for this team, Danico Autry would be that one. Interestingly enough, that they put up there. And of course, I don't know if you agree with that or if you agree with that. Just he was luxury, and
on that
moving him. Having a level of release, you create $9 million in cap.
Yeah,
and $9 million can go a long way, I imagine.